We need younger talent, Alex, someone who will work for substantially less than your current salary, Marcus Thorne stated, his voice devoid of warmth, transmitted through the impersonal sterility of a Zoom call. His image flickered slightly on my monitor. To put it plainly, your compensation package is simply too high for the direction Viridian Dynamics is headed. My name is Alex Pierce. I'm 48 years old, and until this morning, I was a senior account manager at Viridian Dynamics in Denver, Colorado. 15 years. 15 years I'd spent meticulously building their client portfolio from a handful of hopefuls into a robust, thriving network. And it all unraveled in a curt, 8-minute video conference on a Tuesday. My home office, usually a sanctuary of focused work, suddenly felt cold. Behind me, out of focus for the camera, a small framed photo of Emily and me on her graduation day sat on the bookshelf. A bitter irony, I thought. I'd seen the storm clouds gathering for months, ever since Marcus Thorne had been brought in as vice president of sales. The air had filled with whispers, those chilling corporate euphemisms: restructuring, modernization, strategic cost-cutting. All polite ways of saying experienced, and therefore more expensive, people were about to be shown the door. Marcus was 36, always impeccably dressed in bespoke suits that probably cost more than my first reliable sedan, and he had a particular fondness for peppering his speech with terms like disruptive innovation and synergy, as if they were exotic spices he'd just discovered. During virtual team meetings, his gaze would occasionally flick to my video feed, not with outright dislike, but with a palpable impatience. It was a look that made me feel like an outdated piece of hardware, a dial-up modem in an age of fiber optics. Still functional, perhaps, but clunky and out of place. The market is evolving, Alex, he continued, his eyes briefly scanning something on his other screen, presumably my personnel file, reducing my career to a set of data points. We require individuals who inherently understand digital natives, who live and breathe social media engagement strategies. He paused, then added with a dismissive wave of his hand, "You understand the new landscape." Oh, I understood it. I just fundamentally disagreed with his valuation of what truly mattered. I had forged deep, lasting relationships with our most important clients through countless phone calls, yes, but also through hundreds of face-to-face meetings, through years of solving complex problems that no marketing algorithm, however sophisticated, could ever hope to touch. When David Miller at Apex Dynamics faced crippling production delays that threatened to send his company spiraling into bankruptcy, I didn't send him a link to a FAQ page. I spent an entire weekend on the phone with him, with logistics, with finance, restructuring his entire payment schedule, buying him the breathing room he desperately needed. When Sophia Chen of Nova Solutions tragically lost her husband, I didn't just email over the contract extension. I personally, quietly, delivered it to her home, ensuring she wouldn't have the added burden of business minutiae weighing on her mind during such a devastating time. Those were the foundations of loyalty. But Marcus Thorne wasn't interested in those stories, those human connections. He was looking at my salary, a figure on a spreadsheet, and seeing an expense that could be neatly halved by hiring a bright-eyed, less experienced 20-something. "I understand completely, Mr. Thorne," I said, keeping my voice even, my expression carefully neutral. There was no handshake, of course, just the sterile click of him ending the Zoom meeting. He seemed almost visibly relieved by my lack of argument, even offering a curt, "Thank you for your professionalism, Alex," before his image vanished from my screen. The screen went black for a moment before defaulting to my desktop wallpaper, a serene mountain landscape. I stared at it, the silence of the house pressing in. Later that afternoon, as I began the grim task of digitally archiving my professional life from the company servers and saving personal notes to my own drive, Chloe Davis from HR pinged me on the internal chat. She'd been with Pioneer Solutions, the precursor to Viridian, almost as long as I had. We were hired within weeks of each other. "Alex, you okay?" Her message popped up, Simple and direct. "I'm fine, Chloe," I typed back, and to my own surprise, I largely meant it. A strange sense of calm was settling over the initial shock. "They don't know what they're letting go of," she typed back a moment later, her message conveying her clear frustration. "Marcus has the board utterly convinced he's some kind of wunderkind, a prophet of profit." I just typed, "Thanks, Chloe." And then I started meticulously sifting through my digital files, making sure my personal contact lists, the ones with the real information, were secure. What neither Marcus nor even Chloe fully realized was that I wasn't consumed by anger. Not yet, anyway. My mind, trained by years of strategic thinking, was already 3, maybe 4 steps ahead. Because while Marcus Thorne was undoubtedly poring over spreadsheets, fantasizing about reduced overhead, I was remembering direct phone numbers, recalling personal promises, and mentally cataloging 15 years of clients. Clients who, when they needed something, didn't call the Viridian Dynamics general line. They called Alex Pierce. They called me. I came to Viridian Dynamics when it was still Pioneer Solutions, a tiny operation with just 3 employees, a cramped, windowless office in a less fashionable part of Denver, and far more ambition than actual paying clients. Back then, Samuel Vance ran the place. Mr. Vance was a former top salesman, a man who built his career on the unshakable belief that business, true business, was founded on relationships, not mere transactions. "People sign contracts with people, Alex," he'd told me during my interview, his gaze firm and kind. "Not with company logos or fancy mission statements. Never forget that." And I never had. For 15 years, I lived and breathed those words. I was the first person clients called when trouble brewed, the familiar voice of reassurance, and the last person they spoke to before confidently signing renewal agreements. My personal cell phone held more direct, after-hours numbers of CEOs and key decision-makers than the official company directory ever would. My marriage, admittedly, had paid a significant price for this unwavering dedication. Nancy and I had divorced 8 years ago, a casualty, in part, of my relentless prioritization of pioneers, then Viridians, growth over the nurturing of our own relationship. My daughter, Emily, who is now 22 and working for a local NPO, had navigated her high school years seeing me mostly on weekends and rushed holidays, a fact that still pricked at my conscience. Now, older and perhaps wiser, she understood, or at least, she said she did. She was, in fact, the very first person I called after Marcus Thorne's digital axe had fallen. I found her number on my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button for a beat before pressing it. "They did what?" Her outrage was immediate, a fierce, protective wave washing through the phone line, and a small, sad smile touched my lips. It felt good to have someone in my corner, unequivocally. "It's just business, I said, the words sounding hollow, even to my own ears as I later drove home from a quick, final trip to the office to retrieve a few personal items, a framed photo, a favorite mug, things that couldn't be wiped from a server. My entire Viridian career was now condensed into a single, unassuming cardboard box on the passenger seat. The new VP, Mr. Thorne, wants to build his own team, bring in his own people. After everything you've done for them? For that company? That's just fundamentally wrong, Dad." She wasn't wrong, not by a long shot, but I found I wasn't particularly interested in the moral victory of being right. I was far more interested in, and focused on, what came next. The warning signs, in retrospect, had been blinking like neon lights for months. Samuel Vance had retired the previous year, selling his majority stake in Viridian Dynamics to a consortium of investors who had, at the time, made all the right noises about respecting and maintaining the company's established culture. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne arrived, armed with sleek PowerPoint presentations, an MBA from a prestigious private university, and a vocabulary brimming with the latest corporate jargon. Suddenly, our quarterly review meetings, once collaborative and client-focused, became sterile lectures filled with terms like optimize market penetration, leveraging core competencies, and minimizing client acquisition cost. No one talked about relationships anymore. It was all about the numbers, the cold, hard data. 3 weeks ago, I'd been walking past the main conference room and overheard Marcus Thorne's voice, sharp and confident, speaking to someone from HR. The legacy staff compensation structures, he was saying, his tone dripping with disdain, are significantly out of alignment with current industry standards, particularly within the client relations division. Legacy staff. That's what I had become. A relic. An expensive antique in a showroom geared towards minimalist, disposable furniture. I'd gone back to my office that day, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, and pulled up my real contact list, not the company's impersonal CRM database, but my meticulously curated personal records. These were files filled with names, direct numbers, and 15 years of detailed notes. Notes about kids' graduations and college choices, spouses, names, vacation homes in Vail or Aspen, favorite restaurants for client dinners, even pet peeves. This was the kind of nuanced, invaluable information you couldn't just download from a centralized database or glean from a LinkedIn profile. This was the lifeblood of true client relationship management. Then, acting on a hunch, a premonition, I'd made a discreet call to Ethan Reed. Ethan was an old colleague, a sharp guy who'd left Viridian, then still Pioneer about 5 years earlier to join Phoenix Consulting Group, a rapidly expanding competitor. We'd stayed in touch, grabbing lunch or a coffee every few months to catch up on industry gossip and family news. So, Ethan, I'd begun casually, after the initial pleasantries, how's Phoenix CG treating you these days? Growing like a weed, Alex, in the best possible way. He'd replied, his voice enthusiastic. Actually, funny you should call. We were just talking internally last week about needing to expand our senior client relations team. Looking for someone with serious experience and a solid network. I remembered a slow smile spreading across my face, a spark of an idea igniting. That's very interesting to know, Ethan. The day Marcus Thorne finally summoned me for that fateful Zoom call, I already had a carefully worded, very attractive offer letter from Ethan Reed, on behalf of Phoenix Consulting Group, sitting unread in my personal email inbox. I hadn't opened it yet, but its presence was a silent reassurance. 3 days after Viridian Dynamics had unceremoniously severed ties with me, I found myself sitting in my car in the sprawling parking lot of the Oakhaven Country Club, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. I watched as Marcus Thorne's gleaming new Tesla pulled into a prime spot near the clubhouse. He was meeting David Miller from Apex Dynamics, who had been not just my biggest client for the past decade, but also a man I considered a friend. From the discreet distance of my car, I observed them shaking hands on the manicured lawn. Marcus, all expansive, confident gestures and a blindingly white smile. David, his expression polite but discernibly reserved, his handshake looking more like a brief, necessary formality. That's when the full weight of it, the sheer audacity, truly hit me. Marcus Thorne wasn't just replacing me with a cheaper alternative. He was attempting to meticulously, arrogantly, step directly into my shoes, to appropriate the very relationships I had painstakingly cultivated over 15 long years. He actually believed, it seemed, that client loyalty, that deep-seated trust, could be transferred as easily as data files on a server. Meeting by meeting, handshake by carefully orchestrated handshake, he was planning to insert himself into the intricate web of connections I'd woven with dedication and genuine care. I watched them walk towards the first tee, their figures silhouetted against the lush green of the fairway. And as I did, something inside me, something that had been churning with a mixture of shock and nascent anger, finally settled. It wasn't anger that remained, though. It was a cold, sharp clarity, a sense of purpose. I started my car, the engine humming quietly, and drove straight to Phoenix Consulting Group's impressive downtown Denver office. Ethan Reed met me in the sleek, modern lobby, a look of genuine surprise, quickly followed by a wide grin. spreading across his face. "Alex, I wasn't expecting you so soon," he said, extending his hand warmly. "I thought you were going to take at least a week to mull over our offer." "I'm done mulling, Ethan," I replied, my voice firm, a new resolve hardening my tone. "But I do want to discuss modifying some of the terms before I formally accept." In Phoenix CG's spacious, light-filled conference room, with a panoramic view of the Denver skyline, I laid out precisely what I needed. It wasn't just about salary or a title. I needed complete autonomy over client onboarding processes, the authority to structure my own specialized team, and most critically, a clear, unequivocal understanding. Phoenix CG would not attempt to enforce any dubious non-compete clauses against my former clients who might choose, of their own volition, to follow me. Ethan listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression serious. When I finished, he picked up his phone and, without a word, called in Olivia Hayes, the CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group. Ms. Hayes was a formidable woman in her early 50s, known for her sharp intellect and decisive leadership. She had built Phoenix CG from a small boutique firm into a major industry player. She listened patiently as I reiterated my position, my non-negotiables. "You're essentially asking for our blessing to bring your established client base with you, Mr. Pierce," she said, her gaze steady and appraising, after I'd clearly articulated my strategy. "I'm not taking anything, Ms. Hayes, that isn't already intrinsically mine through years of dedicated effort," I responded, meeting her gaze directly. "These relationships, this trust, exists because of 15 years of consistent, reliable work, of promises kept and problems solved. The formal contracts might currently reside with Viridian Dynamics, but the loyalty, the genuine trust, that belongs to me." Olivia Hayes studied me for a long, silent moment, her expression unreadable. Then a ghost of a smile touched her lips, and she nodded. A single, decisive movement. "Make it happen, Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice resonating with authority. "And the terms, as you've outlined them, are yours." That evening, I sat at my familiar kitchen table, a fresh legal pad, and my ever-present smartphone laid out before me. The house was quiet. I didn't feel vindictive, not in the petty sense of the word. I felt a profound sense of purpose, a quiet determination. This wasn't about exacting revenge on Marcus Thorne or Viridian Dynamics. This was about honoring the work I'd poured my life into, about respecting the deep-seated trust I'd earned, and about upholding the promises I'd consistently kept to my clients. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. "How are you doing, Dad?" "I mean, really doing?" she asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. I paused, considering her question honestly. "Better than I expected, I told her, a surprising lightness in my voice. "Sometimes, I guess, you need to get unceremoniously pushed out of one place to clearly see where you actually, truly belong." "So, what's the big plan now?" she asked, a hint of excitement creeping into her tone. "I'm starting over, sweetheart," I said. I looked down at my legal pad, at the list of names I'd begun to jot down. 10 names, each one circled. 10 key clients. "But this time," I added, a confident smile playing on my lips, "I'm not starting from scratch." After we hung up, a renewed sense of energy coursing through me, I opened my laptop and began drafting emails. These weren't addressed to the CEOs or the primary contacts themselves, not yet. These meticulously crafted messages were for their executive assistants, the gatekeepers, the unsung heroes who truly controlled access and managed the chaotic schedules of their bosses. These were people I had always treated with the same courtesy and genuine respect I afforded the executives they so capably worked for. "I wanted to let you know that I've recently moved to a new position at Phoenix Consulting Group," each email began. "I would be very grateful for an opportunity to connect with client's name personally in the coming days to provide an update. Absolutely no pressure, no hard sales pitch, I promise. Just the plain truth about my new role and how I can continue to support their business." By midnight, as a gentle rain began to fall outside my Denver home, I had received positive responses from 7 of them. 7 out of 10. Each email, though worded differently, conveyed the same essential message. She definitely wants to hear from you, Alex. When are you free to talk? I closed my laptop, a feeling of quiet satisfaction washing over me. For the first time in months, I knew I would sleep soundly. Tomorrow would be day 1. Day 1 of showing Marcus Thorne and Viridian Dynamics exactly what and who they had so foolishly, so arrogantly thrown away. My first call the next morning was to David Miller at Apex Dynamics. No going through an assistant, no preliminary screening. I dialed his direct cell number, a number I knew by heart. Alex, I was genuinely wondering when I'd hear from you, he said, his voice immediately warm, a clear note of relief evident. I had a rather uninspiring golf meeting with your replacement, Marcus Thorne, yesterday. He chuckled dryly. Spent nearly 4 hours listening to him drone on about synergy and leveraging disruptive paradigms. Not once did he ask about my daughter's recent graduation from CU Boulder, something you and I talked about for months. That's precisely why I'm calling, David, I said, a smile in my voice. I've moved to Phoenix Consulting Group, but please know, this isn't a sales call. This is a courtesy, a point of information. If you're happy with Viridian, if they're meeting your needs, then that's genuinely all that matters to me. The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a fraction of a second, a heartbeat. Alex, he said, his voice firm and decisive. Send me whatever paperwork is necessary. Apex Dynamics follows you, period. By the end of that first week, I'd had remarkably similar conversations with 6 other major clients. No aggressive tactics, no desperate pleas, no hard sell. Just honesty, transparency, and a reaffirmation of our long-standing relationships. I was somewhere new with enhanced capabilities and resources at Phoenix CG. They could choose to come with me if they felt it was in their best interest. They all wanted to. It was Sophia Chen from Nova Solutions who first alerted me to the inevitable counter-offensive. Alex, your old company, Viridian Dynamics, called me yesterday, she said, her tone concerned, during a video call late the following week. Some rather aggressive young man, I believe he said his name was Marcus Thorne, informed me in no uncertain terms that you were in breach of your employment contract. He claimed that clients couldn't legally follow you to a new firm. I thanked her for the heads up, my mind already racing. I immediately contacted Ethan, who quickly connected me with Phoenix Consulting Group's formidable legal team. They reviewed my Viridian employment agreement, which I had fortuitously saved a digital copy of, and confirmed what I had already suspected. Marcus Thorne was bluffing, trying to intimidate. My contract contained a standard non-solicitation clause, preventing me from actively poaching Viridian employees, but there was absolutely nothing that legally prevented clients from choosing, of their own free will, to move their business to another provider, namely me at Phoenix CG. As long as you're not actively and provably poaching them, Alex, and it's clear they are initiating the move, you're completely in the clear, the lead attorney assured me, her voice calm and confident. The next morning, I arrived at my new, spacious office at Phoenix CG to find a sharply worded email from Marcus Thorne waiting in my inbox. The subject line, in aggressive, all caps, read, "Cease and desist urgent." The body of the message was precisely what one would expect from a cornered, desperate man. Thinly veiled threats of immediate litigation, wild accusations of unlawful client interference, and strident demands that I return all proprietary Viridian client information, immediately information, of course, that I had never taken. It ended with a magnanimous-sounding offer to discuss reasonable terms of a settlement before this unfortunate matter escalates further and causes irreparable damage to your professional reputation. I printed it out, a grim smile playing on my lips, and handed it straight to Ethan. "He's panicking," Ethan said, a thin, satisfied smile spreading across his face as he read it. The Viridian board must be asking some very pointed, very uncomfortable questions by now. He just doesn't understand what's happening, Ethan, I replied, shaking my head. He genuinely thinks I've stolen something, like I've absconded with the office silverware. That afternoon, my personal cell phone, the one with all the real numbers, rang. It was Chloe Davis, my former colleague from Viridian's HR department. Alex, they're in absolute full meltdown mode over here, she whispered, her voice hushed and urgent. Marcus Thorne has been locked in emergency meetings with the board all day. I've heard snippets from the executive assistants. They're frantically talking about implementing massive client retention bonuses, launching emergency outreach programs, damage control on an epic scale. She paused, then added, her voice dropping even lower. And Alex. He told them you hacked the CRM system and stole the client data. I had to laugh at that, a short, incredulous bark of amusement. Chloe, you know as well as I do, I've probably never even successfully logged into their clunky CRM more than a handful of times in all my years there. My own records were always far more reliable. I know, Alex. That's precisely why I'm calling you, she said, a note of triumph in her voice. Because they're so convinced of your theft, they're bringing in an outside cybersecurity firm to conduct a full forensic audit of all system activity, looking for your digital fingerprints. And when they inevitably don't find a single trace of unauthorized access or data exfiltration by me, I finished for her, the pieces clicking into place, they'll have no choice but to admit to the board and to themselves that I didn't steal anything. Exactly, Chloe exclaimed, her whisper a little louder now. But Alex, please, be careful. Marcus is running scared. He's cornered. He made grandiose promises to the board that he could slash personnel costs, especially legacy staff like you, without losing a single significant client. Now he's lost 7 major accounts in just over a week. He's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. After thanking Chloe for her invaluable, albeit risky, intelligence, I immediately called Olivia Hayes and brought her fully up to speed on the latest developments. She wasn't remotely concerned about Marcus Thorne's empty legal threats, but she was, I could tell, deeply impressed by the smooth and rapid transfer of such significant client accounts. 7 major accounts, Alex? In just 5 business days? She said, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. All without a single formal sales presentation or a discount offer. I have to say, in all my years in this business, I've never seen anything quite like it. It's not about sales tactics, Ms. Hayes, I told her, my voice quiet but firm. It's about trust. 15 years of cultivated trust. Just as I was packing my briefcase to leave for the day, feeling a sense of weary satisfaction, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message from a number I didn't recognize. The message was terse, almost demanding. This is Marcus Thorne, Viridian Dynamics. We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The Daily Grind Cafe, downtown. This situation doesn't need to get any uglier than it already is, Pierce. I showed the text to Ethan, who was working late in the adjacent office. He read it, his brow furrowing, and immediately advised against going. He's clearly desperate, Alex. Cornered, Ethan said, echoing Chloe's warning. Don't walk into a potential ambush. Don't give him any ammunition he can twist and use against you. But I disagreed. A strange sense of calm pervaded me. No, Ethan. I want to hear what he has to say, I replied. I think it's time we had a face-to-face conversation. The next morning, I arrived at the Daily Grind Cafe, a bustling downtown spot, a good 15 minutes early. I chose a small table in the back, offering a clear, unobstructed view of the entrance, but also a degree of privacy. Marcus Thorne walked in at precisely 9:05 a.m., 5 minutes late, already trying to establish some petty dominance. He scanned the crowded cafe with an air of forced importance until his eyes finally landed on me. His usually confident, almost arrogant stride seemed a little less certain today. I could detect a subtle tension in the set of his expensive shoulders. Pierce, thanks for coming, he said, a little too brusquely as he slid into the booth opposite me, not waiting for an invitation. He didn't offer to buy me a coffee. I think perhaps we got off on the wrong foot a couple of weeks ago. I didn't respond immediately. I simply waited, my gaze steady, allowing the silence to stretch, to work for me. Look, he continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, his voice lower now, more conciliatory. Let's cut to the chase. What would it reasonably take to get you to stop this? This client exodus? His eyes darted around the cafe, as if worried about being overheard. The Viridian board is breathing down my neck. They're concerned. He attempted a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Whatever Phoenix Consulting is paying you, Alex, Viridian can match it. We can probably even beat it. Plus a significant signing bonus, of course, for your trouble. And just like that, with those desperate, misguided words, I knew. I had him exactly where I needed him. Exposed, floundering, and completely missing the fundamental point. I'm not interested in coming back to Viridian, Marcus, I said simply, my voice calm and measured. Marcus Thorne's carefully constructed professional smile faltered, then vanished, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then annoyance. Then what is it you want, Pierce? He pressed, his tone hardening slightly. Some kind of lucrative consulting arrangement? A finder's fee, perhaps, for the accounts you're redirecting? I took a slow, deliberate sip of the coffee I'd bought myself. You still don't get it, do you, Marcus? I said, setting my cup down gently. This isn't about money. It was never about the money for me, not primarily. Oh, please, he scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. Everything at the end of the day is about money, Pierce. That's business 101. And that fundamental misunderstanding, Marcus, I replied, my voice still quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight, is precisely why you're losing, and why you'll continue to lose. I leaned forward slightly. Those clients, Marcus, the ones who are choosing to move their business, they aren't following me because Phoenix Consulting Group offered them marginally better rates or flashier service packages. They're not impressed by buzzwords. They're following me because for 15 years, I answered their calls at 10 p.m. on a Sunday if they had an urgent problem. They're following me because I remembered their kids' names, their spouse's health issues, their business anxieties, their small triumphs. They're following me because I consistently treated them like valued human beings, not like mere account numbers on a revenue spreadsheet. Marcus Thorne's expression hardened further, a defensive mask snapping into place. That's all very touching, Pierce. Sentimental even. But let's be practical here. This is the real world. Name your price. What will it take to get you to stop actively poaching our client list? I haven't poached anyone, Marcus, I stated unequivocally. I haven't breached any contracts, despite your threatening emails. I simply informed people with whom I have long-standing professional and personal relationships, that I had moved to a new firm. They, and they alone, made their own informed decisions based on their own best interests. He leaned back in the booth, attempting to regain his composure, studying me with narrowed eyes. The Viridian board isn't happy, Pierce. Not happy at all. They brought me in to modernize the company, to streamline operational costs, to increase shareholder value, not to oversee the loss of millions of dollars in key accounts virtually overnight. And who did they blame, Marcus? I asked, my voice soft but pointed. When you had to report those losses to them? Did you tell them the full story? His slight, almost imperceptible flinch, the brief flicker in his eyes, told me everything I needed to know. That's not relevant to this discussion, he said, a little too quickly. Oh, I think it's entirely relevant, Marcus. To me, at least. I leaned forward again, my gaze unwavering. Because I'm willing to bet a significant sum that you didn't tell them the unvarnished truth. You didn't admit that you summarily fired the one person directly responsible for cultivating and maintaining those crucial, high-value relationships without even attempting to understand the depth or nature of those connections. That you looked at my 15 years of experience and my salary not as a valuable asset, an investment in client loyalty, but merely as a liability, an easy line item to cut from your budget. Marcus Thorne's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching visibly at his temple. The board understands, he said, his voice strained. That necessary corporate restructuring sometimes comes with temporary, unavoidable disruption. Is that what you call it, Marcus? I pressed, my voice laced with incredulity. Losing nearly 30% of Viridian's annual revenue base in less than 2 weeks? You call that temporary disruption? That clearly hit home. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The carefully maintained composure was visibly cracking. 30%, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. How? It's only 7 clients so far. 7 clients, Marcus, I clarified, my voice cool and precise, who collectively represent nearly a third of Viridian Dynamics' total annual billing, or they did, until last week. But you wouldn't know that exact figure, would you? I continued, relentless now. Because you were too busy scrutinizing salary spreadsheets and fantasizing about cost-saving synergies. You weren't looking at the actual client value reports, were you? You didn't understand the concentration of revenue. The color drained noticeably from his face. He looked, for the first time since I'd known him, genuinely shaken. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that he had been selectively and foolishly underreporting the true extent of the damage to the Viridian board. How many more are at risk? He asked, his voice now stripped of all its earlier arrogance, a raw note of fear creeping in. Potentially, Marcus? All of them, I said, with complete and brutal honesty. Every single major client I personally handled for Viridian over the past 15 years has already reached out to me at Phoenix Consulting. Or their people have reached out to my people. I haven't even had to make most of the calls myself. The word is out. He stared at me, speechless for a long moment, the bustling noise of the daily grind cafe fading into a dull roar around us. What happens? He finally said, his voice low and threatening, a desperate, last-ditch attempt at intimidation. If I go back to the board right now and tell them that you've been actively and illegally soliciting our clients, that you took proprietary, confidential information when you left, then you'd be lying, Marcus, I replied calmly, my voice unwavering. And your own expensive IT forensic audit will definitively prove that you're lying. I didn't take a single confidential document. I didn't download a single unauthorized file. I didn't breach a single professional confidence or NDA. The only thing I took with me, Marcus, was 15 years of professional relationships that I built personally, ethically, and painstakingly. One conversation, one solved problem at a time. You can't threaten me with falsehoods, Marcus. It won't work. He drew back as if I'd physically struck him, his eyes wide with shock. How? How did you know about the IT audit? He stammered. I just smiled, a slow, knowing smile. People talk, Marcus. People talk to people they trust. That's another fundamental aspect of this business and of human nature that you clearly don't understand. Just then, Marcus Thorne's phone, lying on the table between us, buzzed insistently. He glanced down at the screen, and I saw something flicker across his expression, a raw flash of panic, quickly, but not completely, suppressed. I need to take this, he said, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. We're not finished here, Pierce. But as I watched him hurry towards the cafe entrance, phone pressed to his ear, his shoulders slumped, I knew with absolute certainty that we were. Whatever crisis was unfolding at Viridian Dynamics was clearly accelerating far faster than he could possibly control. Later that afternoon, back in my office at Phoenix CG, Ethan Reed stopped by my door, a puzzled but intrigued expression on his face. Alex, you just got a rather cryptic call. From a Mr. Samuel Vance? He said, phrasing it as a question. He said you'd know the number. Isn't that your former boss from Pioneer Solutions? The one who retired a while back. Former boss, former mentor, and the original former owner of what is now Viridian Dynamics. I corrected him gently, a sense of anticipation building within me. Did he leave a message, Ethan? Yes, Ethan confirmed, consulting his notes. Said you'd have his direct number, no need to leave one. Also said, and I'm quoting him directly here, Alex, the Viridian board just called an emergency, unscheduled meeting. They want to talk to you. Yesterday. I nodded slowly, not entirely surprised. Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it. After Ethan left, I leaned back in my comfortable new chair, gazing out at the Denver skyline, considering my next move. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place far more rapidly and perhaps more dramatically than I had initially anticipated. Samuel Vance, a man of immense integrity and few wasted words, wouldn't have called me directly, and with such urgency, unless something truly significant, something game-changing was happening at Viridian. I picked up my smartphone and, without needing to look it up, dialed Samuel's private number from memory. They're in a full-blown, unmitigated panic, Alex, Samuel Vance said without any preamble, his familiar gravelly voice a welcome sound, the moment he answered the call. When the Viridian board finally realized exactly which clients had already jumped ship and the sheer financial magnitude of those losses, they apparently called me in a desperate attempt to understand what in the hell was actually going on. I leaned back further in my chair, a faint smile touching my lips. And what did you tell them, Samuel? I asked, though I had a strong feeling I already knew the answer. The unvarnished, unadulterated truth, Alex, he replied, a characteristic growl in his voice. That the primary reason Viridian Dynamics has enjoyed such a remarkably stable and profitable blue-chip client base for all these years was almost entirely because of you. That you were worth every single penny they paid you, and then some. That firing you was an act of catastrophic idiocy. I appreciate that, Samuel, more than you know. This isn't about appreciation, Alex, he growled, though I could hear the underlying warmth. This is about 15 years of your hard work, your dedication, the company we built being flushed down the proverbial toilet by some arrogant, overpaid kid with an MBA who thinks complex business relationships can be managed by algorithms and buzzwords. He paused, taking a breath. The board wants an emergency session, Alex. With you. They're seriously asking if you would consider coming back to Viridian to stop the bleeding. I wasn't entirely surprised by the offer, but it wasn't in itself what I truly wanted. As you know, Samuel, I'm quite settled at Phoenix Consulting Group now, I reminded him gently, and I've brought 7 of or rather, their biggest clients with me already. Soon to be 10, actually, I admitted, after a brief mental calculation. 3 more major accounts are finalizing their transition paperwork with Phoenix CG this week. A low, impressed whistle came through the phone line from Samuel. 10? Good Lord, Alex. No wonder they're panicking. What percentage of their revenue is that? By my calculations, Samuel, those 10 clients represent approximately 46% of Viridian Dynamics' total annual revenue. I finished for him, my voice calm and factual. The line went quiet for a long moment. You always did know everyone's numbers, Alex, often better than they knew them themselves, Samuel Vance finally said, a note of rueful admiration in his voice. So, what's your play here, son? What do you want? Because I can tell you right now, the Viridian board is ready to offer you Marcus Thorne's job on a silver platter, probably with a hefty raise and an apology, if you'll just come back and stop this hemorrhaging. It was a tempting thought, admittedly, for about 3 seconds. Then I vividly remembered Marcus Thorne's dismissive tone during that cold Zoom call, the condescending way he'd barely looked at my image on the screen, the chilling speed with which 15 years of unwavering loyalty and consistent high performance had been contemptuously reduced to a mere line item on a cost-cutting spreadsheet. I'm not interested in Marcus Thorne's job, Samuel, I said, my voice firm and clear. But I am interested in proposing something else entirely. Something that could be mutually beneficial. Name it, Alex. I'm listening. And I suspect they will be too, very closely. A strategic partnership arrangement, Samuel, between Phoenix Consulting Group and Viridian Dynamics. Shared client services, A collaborative approach for key accounts that would genuinely benefit from the combined complementary specialties of both firms. Samuel Vance was silent for a moment, clearly processing the unexpected nature of my proposal. "Let me get this straight, Alex," he said slowly. "You want the Viridian board to authorize a formal partnership with the very company that is, as we speak, systematically and effectively gutting their most profitable client list? I want them to recognize the new reality, Samuel." I corrected him gently but firmly. "At the rate things are currently progressing, Viridian Dynamics won't have enough major clients left by year's end to sustain its current operational structure. They are facing a genuine crisis, but a carefully structured partnership could stabilize both companies. It could be a win-win. My clients, the ones who have chosen to follow me, would get the absolute best of both worlds, my dedicated service, backed by Phoenix CG's innovative resources, plus access to Viridian's legacy strengths where appropriate. Viridian, in turn, would retain a significant portion of that revenue stream instead of losing it entirely. And Phoenix Consulting Group gains considerable market share and credibility without engaging in a protracted, destructive war of attrition. And what about Marcus Thorne in this new arrangement?" Samuel asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "That, Samuel, is entirely the Viridian board's decision," I said, my tone neutral, though we both knew what the inevitable outcome for Marcus would be. "I have absolutely no personal interest in his future, one way or another. My only genuine concern at this point is for the clients, ensuring their continued success, and for the many good, hardworking employees at Viridian who've been unfairly caught in the middle of his ill-conceived and poorly executed restructuring." Samuel Vance chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "You always were a far better chess player than anyone, myself included at times, ever gave you credit for, Alex. I'll present your creative proposal to the board tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I'll let you know how it goes." After hanging up with Samuel, a sense of profound calm settling over me, I immediately called Olivia Hayes into my office and carefully, thoroughly, laid out the entire proposal. She listened intently, her sharp eyes missing nothing, occasionally making concise notes on a pad. "This is an unusually generous proposal, Alex," she said thoughtfully when I had finished, her gaze searching mine. "Given our current momentum, we could, quite frankly, just wait another month or two and likely pick up the vast majority of Viridian's remaining desirable clients as their situation continues to deteriorate." "We could, Ms. Hayes. You're absolutely right," I agreed, nodding. "But that scorched earth approach, while potentially profitable in the short term, would inevitably hurt a lot of good people, loyal employees, who still work at Viridian, people I've known for years. This way, if it works, both companies can emerge stronger. The clients receive optimal, integrated service. And hopefully, nobody else loses their job simply because of one man's short-sighted ambition and profound lack of understanding of what truly drives this business." Olivia Hayes studied me for a long, contemplative moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she nodded slowly, a genuine smile finally breaking through her usually reserved demeanor. "You really aren't doing any of this for revenge, are you, Alex?" she stated, more as a fact than a question. "Revenge is unproductive, Miss Hayes. It's a wasteful emotion," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm far more interested in building something better, something stronger, something more resilient for everyone involved." The next morning, my personal cell phone rang at precisely 9:45 a.m. It was Samuel Vance calling, as I suspected, directly from the Viridian Dynamics boardroom. "They're in, Alex," he said simply, his voice carrying a note of undisguised satisfaction. "Full strategic partnership agreement approved in principle, pending final legal review from both sides, of course." He paused, and I could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from the Viridian board members in the background. "And Marcus Thorne," Samuel added, his voice dropping slightly, "has been strongly encouraged to tender his resignation, effective immediately." "And the other Viridian employees, Samuel? The ones who were worried?" I asked, holding my breath. No further restructuring, Alex. No more layoffs, he confirmed, his voice firm. The board has, belatedly, admitted they got far too caught up in Thorne's slick presentations and his seductive vision of radical cost cutting. They momentarily forgot what actually makes this business, any successful service business, truly work. I thanked him, a profound sense of relief washing over me, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even fully realized I'd been carrying. It wasn't about winning in a competitive sense. It wasn't about revenge, satisfying as that might have briefly seemed. It was about setting things right, about restoring a measure of fairness and respect. Olivia Hayes appeared in my doorway almost immediately, her eyebrows raised in a silent question, a knowing look in her eyes. "We have a deal, Miss Hayes," I told her, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Now, together, we get to build something significantly better, more innovative than either Viridian Dynamics or Phoenix Consulting Group could ever have managed alone." She smiled back, a broad, genuine smile of shared success. "All because," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "they foolishly underestimated the quiet, experienced account manager who just nodded politely and walked away with their most valuable assets." 6 weeks later, I stood at the podium in Phoenix Consulting Group's largest conference room, now temporarily rebranded for this joint announcement. I faced a diverse crowd of familiar, expectant faces, key clients from both Viridian Dynamics and Phoenix CG, several Viridian board members looking considerably more relaxed, and staff from both companies, mingling with a sense of cautious optimism. The strategic partnership between Viridian Dynamics and Phoenix Consulting Group was being made official today. Marcus Thorne, unsurprisingly, was not present. The last I'd heard, through the industry grapevine, was that he'd quickly taken a significantly less prestigious position with a struggling tech startup down in Boulder, where his aggressive cost-cutting approach might, ironically, actually be more appropriate, or at least more tolerated. Today marks the beginning of something truly unique, something transformative in our industry here in Denver, I said, my voice clear and confident, as I looked out across the gathered faces. This is not a merger. This is not an acquisition. This is a true, collaborative partnership, founded on the fundamental, enduring understanding that sustainable business relationships are built by people, for people, not by impersonal spreadsheets or fleeting algorithms. From the back of the room, I spotted Samuel Vance, beaming with a look of immense, almost paternal pride. Beside him stood Chloe Davis and several other long-term Viridian employees, their expressions now ones of relief and renewed hope, a stark contrast to the anxiety they had undoubtedly felt just a few short weeks earlier. The partnership agreement itself was elegant in its simplicity, a testament to collaborative, clear-headed negotiation. Clients could choose which company, Viridian or Phoenix CG, would serve as their primary service provider, but they would now have seamless access to the specialized expertise and unique service offerings of both firms. Revenue would be shared equitably based on service utilization and client management, and, most importantly for the long-term stability and success of this venture, the client relations teams from both companies would be unified, operating under my direct leadership. After the formal announcements and the polite applause, David Miller from Apex Dynamics approached me, shaking his head in genuine amazement, a broad grin on his face. "Alex, when you told me you were leaving Viridian, I was ready to follow you anywhere, no questions asked," he said, his voice filled with sincere appreciation. "But this collaborative solution you've engineered? This is even better than I could have imagined." He clapped me on the shoulder. "You somehow managed to turn getting unceremoniously fired into the absolute best thing that could have happened for practically everyone involved. Well, everyone except perhaps for that young fellow who made the initial mistake of firing you." Sophia Chen from Nova Solutions joined us, nodding in emphatic agreement, her eyes sparkling with approval. "That young man, Mr. Thorne, he never truly understood the invaluable asset he was so cavalierly throwing away when he let you go, Alex," she said, her voice clear and insightful. "But we did. Your clients always knew your worth. As the event began to wind down and guests started to depart with a sense of optimism, Olivia Hayes found me standing by the large windows, overlooking the bustling cityscape of Denver stretching out below. The Viridian board, and indeed my own board, Alex, are already calling this a master stroke of diplomacy and business strategy, she said, a note of genuine respect in her voice. In just 6 short weeks, you've not only stabilized but fundamentally transformed the trajectory of both companies. And in doing so, you've secured a level of client loyalty that should endure for many years too. Come. I shook my head, a humble smile on my face. I simply reminded everyone, Ms. Hayes, of something they, deep down, already knew to be true. Enduring business, successful business, isn't ultimately built on relentless cost-cutting or aggressive sales tactics. It's built and sustained on genuine human relationships. And revenge, Alex? She asked, a slight, mischievous smile playing on her lips. Was that perhaps just a small, satisfying part of your brilliant strategy? The best revenge, Ms. Hayes, I replied, my gaze drifting out over the sprawling city of Denver, a city now full of new possibilities. Wasn't just taking the clients from Viridian. It was demonstrating, conclusively, to everyone involved, the right way, the better way to cultivate loyalty and keep them for the long term. 1 month after the official partnership announcement, I left the Phoenix CG office a little early to meet my daughter, Emily, for a celebratory dinner. She'd been following the entire saga with a captivating mixture of filial pride, righteous indignation on my behalf, and sheer amazement at the outcome. So, technically, Dad, she said, her eyes sparkling with amusement as we settled into our favorite booth at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. You're now actually more powerful, more influential in the Denver business scene than you were before Marcus Thorne fired you, right? I shrugged, a smile playing on my lips. It's not really about power, I said, though I understood her point. It's about doing things the right way, ethically, and treating people with respect. The influence is just a byproduct of that. Still, she persisted, a grin spreading across her face. The guy who so arrogantly fired you is gone, completely out of the picture. You've basically got the client relations of 2 major companies reporting to you now, and all your clients, old and new, think you're some kind of business world genius, a miracle worker. I'm just a guy, sweetheart, I said, reaching across the table to affectionately squeeze her hand, who still believes in answering his phone on weekends if a client is in trouble. After a wonderful, relaxed dinner with Emily, filled with laughter and future plans, I drove home to my quiet house in a peaceful Denver suburb. As I unlocked the front door, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past few turbulent months. From the shock and sting of being unceremoniously dismissed via a cold Zoom call, to inadvertently reshaping an entire sector of Denver's competitive business landscape, it had never, not for a single moment, been primarily about getting back at Marcus Thorne or Viridian dynamics. It had always been about proving, perhaps more to myself than to anyone else, that what I had meticulously built over 15 dedicated years, those deep-seated relationships, that hard-earned trust had real, tangible, lasting value. The next morning, I arrived at my bright, spacious office at Phoenix Consulting Group to find a small, neatly wrapped package sitting on my otherwise clear desk. Curious, I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a simple, elegant silver frame, and in the frame was an old, slightly faded photograph of the original Pioneer Solutions team. Just Samuel Vance, myself, and 2 other early colleagues, looking young and full of ambition, standing proudly in front of that tiny, first windowless office all those years ago, probably 15 years now. Tucked behind the frame was a small, handwritten note on Samuel's familiar, distinguished letterhead. It read simply, Alex, people sign contracts with people. Never, ever forget that. Warmly, Samuel. I smiled, a wave of deep gratitude and affection washing over me. I carefully placed the framed photo on the corner of my desk, where clients visiting my office would easily see it, a quiet, constant reminder of where it all started, of the foundational principles that guided me, and why, ultimately, it all mattered so much. Later that day, my schedule was filled with back-to-back meetings, both virtual and in person, with clients from both the legacy Viridian Dynamics portfolio and the expanding Phoenix Consulting Group roster. These weren't crisis management calls, not anymore. There was no damage control needed. These were just the regular, ongoing, relationship-building conversations, the kind of collaborative discussions that had been my unique specialty, my true professional passion, for over 15 years. As I picked up my phone to make my first call of the day, a call to a long-standing client to discuss their evolving needs, I felt something profound, something I hadn't experienced with such clarity in a very long time. A sense of pure, unadulterated professional satisfaction. This wasn't the fleeting thrill of winning a cutthroat corporate battle or the bitter taste of revenge. This was a deeper, more resonant feeling. It was the quiet, confident knowing that doing business the right way, the human way, with integrity and genuine care, still mattered. Perhaps now, in this increasingly digital and often impersonal world, it mattered more than ever. In the end, Marcus Thorne, in his arrogance and short-sightedness, had unintentionally done me an enormous favor. By trying to summarily replace me with someone cheaper, someone he perceived as more aligned with his flawed vision of a modernized, lean operation, he had inadvertently, and rather spectacularly, proven to the entire Denver business community just how truly valuable I, and the relationships I represented, really were. And that, I reflected with a quiet sense of inner peace, was a lesson, a validation, worth every single challenging minute of the entire, unexpected journey.